And for those of you who are just joining us, go ahead and say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. And if you can think about it, which 3 words best describe your brand, or 1 word? And Tally says deep, empathetic, and joyful. Oh, nice. Hi, Kim. Kim is writing in from Ontario. She says she's snowed in today. That makes for a nice bit of concentrated time, doesn't it? Hi, Darcy. Darcy's joining us from Albany. So Kim and Darcy, when you think about the company you work for or yourself, if you're an independent, what are some words that sort of describe your brand? What have you got, John?
It's hard to do.
It's
Even
hard.
having just rebranded Smith and Connors, you know, the words that came to mind are both from a personality standpoint and also how we approach our work. So those are some good key things to think about. John has open, authentic, and engaging. Nice. Elise, would you agree with that?
I think those are fair. And in terms of open, the chat is open for all of you too. If you'd like to say hi and contemplate a little bit, reflect on your own brands at the moment. And then we will get started officially at exactly the top of the hour. So we've got a couple more minutes.
2 more minutes.
Wonderful. So Darcy says community, supportive, and engaging. How wonderful for us all to enjoy these engaging organizations. That makes a huge difference.
That's great. Anybody else have ideas? It can also be about your personality. You know, we'll get into this very shortly about what brand means. It's also roles you play in the work you do. So a role could be being a trusted partner, or it could be that you're a connector. That would be a word to connect with to kind of associate with your brand.
All right, and it looks like we're starting to get more and more people all the time. So if you are just joining us, go ahead and say hi in the chat, and we will get started officially in just 1 minute. So we're almost ready to go. And anybody who shows up late, they're just going to have to catch up. But Rachel says hi.
Where are you from, Rachel? I know we have participants from all over the world registered for this. Really exciting.
It was exciting to see we had people from, I think, all major continents except for Antarctica.
Wow, really?
Because apparently so cool. They're not doing a lot of branding work in their research stations these days. All right, so as you join and as you get started here, go ahead and continue to use the chat. We're going to keep that open. And right now we're going to go ahead and get started because it is exactly 10 o'clock. So today we are here to talk about making meetings and marketing magic with a great brand story. Or, you know, how do you go about identifying that true brand story for your organization? And then once you've got that story, like we talked about in this chat, you know, community, supportive, open, authentic, how do you then build that into your culture and embed it into your everyday meetings? So today I am joined by Tally Smith. She's the co-founder and creative director of Smith and Connors. Tally and I met at a Zebra event. So it's this event for profit-driven companies that are about finding purpose-driven missions and serving from a place of, you know, whole world sustainability and awesomeness. And the work that Tally does is very different than the work that we do at Lucid Meetings. So at Lucid Meetings, we're all about the meeting. She's all about the brand. And yet there was an amazing amount of overlap because we're both tapping into values and meaning and how do you make work joyful. So we're going to start off. Tally's going to lead the first half. I'm going to lead the second half. We're still learning from each other, so we're going to kind of talk and ask questions. And if you've got questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat, and we'll weave those in too. And then at the end, we'll take some time for focused questions and send out the recording afterwards. So with that, I want to turn it over to Tally. Thank you so much, Tally, for being here with us.
Thanks for having me, Elise. Excited to be talking about brand, one of my favorite things. So let's get into it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to design your brand story and why it matters. Whether you're a for-profit company or a nonprofit company or working for government, your stories are how human beings connect. And so we're going to cover in my portion, what is brand and why isn't it a dirty word? What can a brand do to focus your organization, and how you can get started. So this is a kind of an overarching lesson in brand, and we'll talk more about all of the things that go into it. The first thing I love to do is demystify what brand is. It is not just your logo. A lot of people think that. It is actually a complex matrix of thoughts and feelings, everything that someone might think about, feel, when they think about your organization or business, or if you have your own brand as an individual, what is it that they're, feeling and thinking about when they think about you. So I like to show this graphic. The mission and the vision and your values are really the core of your organization. That is not something that in the brand is going to change, but it is the core that we're starting from. And so I like to show this because it's important to just kind of start there. We're going to always start with mission, vision, values, and then brand really is wrapped around that. It's this, it comes out of that, it emanates from it. So your brand should be based upon your mission, vision, values. And if you don't know what those things are, mission, vision, values, you need to create those. Those are really important. And then it's, I think there's a lot of, people say, oh, you're a marketing company, or you do, what's brand versus marketing? Well, marketing, as you can see, is at the very outer edges of this circle for a very good reason. Marketing is how you get your brand out into the world. It's your website, it's your business cards, it's the things that customers or audiences interact with. It's not the brand. But your brand, if done well, should be consistently experienced through your operations, through how you meet, for an example, as we'll talk later, and how you answer the phone. What is it that you say to everything that happens in your business or organization? It can then moves out through communications and to marketing. Really
so when we looked at this originally, this particular slide, the thing that really struck me about it was that it helped clarify that when you do branding work, what you're doing is you're taking charge of your reputation.
Absolutely.
Right. So because all of this stuff, you've got your mission, your vision, your values, your things that you believe that you're about, but what other people outside believe you're about is going to be informed by, not only what you say, but also how you operate, how you communicate, how you market, and then their experience of that brand. So that opportunity to really root into how do we create some intentionality around the reputation we're trying to create, and then the actions we're going to live is cool perspective.
Yeah. And as you can see, it would be, we want consistency. That's super important with brand. If you're not consistent, people don't really know what you're about. So that's what this kind of is all about here. So talking about a good brand, and this is really the nuts and bolts of what a brand is. It's directed at an audience. So to whom are you speaking? So that's, we have to define that. Defined, so that's about the organization's personality and roles, kind of what we were asking in the icebreaker today. What roles and what personality do you assign to your organization? Let's figure that out. And then differentiated. So differentiated is what part of the market are you owning? What is the thing that you do that's different? So we can then craft the brand around that. So that you really are differentiated in your branding. So those are the basic tenets. So when we get to building out what a brand strategy is, it's really those things I just mentioned, in the form of basically a platform. And this is what we're creating, what you can create for your organization to just give you a way to make these decisions. So mission, vision, values is always going to be primal. It's your core truths that we need to build from. Target audiences, this whole direction, who are we talking to? It's not enough to say, my customer is, this type of person living in this area. We want much more about their wants, their fears, their needs. We want to analyze them. And so, that's something I would kind of encourage you to think about. What are the things that would really build a persona around these audiences? Your brand drivers, this is your personality and your roles. So what is your organization about? What's different? What's the personality, and how do we define that? And then the brand position is really about that differentiation. What can you own? What space can you own that is unique in your market or in your industry? And then of course we build messaging around all of that. But this becomes what we call in the end, your brand platform. This is a strategy, exercise. And this is one of the things that I'll be sharing with you at the end of the webinar, is a kind of framework for you to start to build your own brand strategy, and get you thinking about that.
I think I saw, I was tooling about before we got together and decided to do this. And one of the reasons that we connected was that you lead workshops that let people go through this, that walk teams through this, and you call them brand therapy, basically.
Oh, yeah, like design therapy.
Design therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's totally a fun thing to do on your own, but that workshop methodology was pretty cool too.
Absolutely. I think, going deep inside the organization to understand who you are is a kind of a form of therapy, as we see it. Because you're having to ask deep questions. You have to make decisions about who you are.
And who you're not.
And who you're not, based on truths. And so that can be an interesting process. And I'll take you through a little bit more about that. First, I thought we could do a little interactive. So get your chat windows open. So we thought we could look at some brand drivers, because this is kind of a hard concept when you start to, that's a very technical term, but really what I'm showing here are actual brand drivers, personalities and roles that we assigned to clients that we've worked with. So just an example, we worked, let's say here with, let's take this one down here. The justice seeker, the systems changer, the champion finder. This was a foundation that was trying to brand and kind of launch themselves. It was a newly formed foundation. And really what we did after we learned a lot about them is figured out that they have three kind of facets to their personality. They are a justice seeker. They go into societies all over the world and try to basically help them to stop warehousing people with mental health disabilities, mental disabilities. They're a systems changer. They go in and they try to help change the systems. And they are also the champion finder. So they're looking for partners and supporters. And so this was a way for us to say, here's kind of who you are. And so I was thinking we could just kind of stop here for a minute and let you all take a look at these and really just see if any of these, point to something about your own organization, something that you might be able to use. And maybe you could share in the chat if there's anything there that's kind of interesting or that you might be able to use, or that speaks to some part of who you are.
And as you add the things that are resonating for you, right? So for me, for example, curious. Mm-hmm. Curious is absolutely a resonant thing for me. Go ahead and add it into the chat. And when you do, if you want to, there's a little blue bar that says all panelists or all panelists and attendees. Go ahead and share it with everybody if you're open to doing that. So for me, it's curious, for sure.
And the nice thing about this is, as you're looking at it, for me, I'm a very visual person. I'm a creative director and a designer by, in my industry. Ooh, nice, tireless optimist.
Innovative. I love that.
I start to see visuals. I start to see imagery when I think of things like, caring expert from Kim.
which is what Kim said resonates for her.
Yeah. So if I think about caring expert, when I start to think about directing the design work for the brand, I'm starting to think about softer edges, maybe some colors that are very warm. So you can kind of start to see how this might help inform what the look and feel of the brand might become.
And Kim says, caring expert. Deb said, bold truth teller. Kaylin says, notice the interesting differences between the tireless optimist and the insightful optimist. So the little changes make a big difference.
Absolutely.
And then you can see, Rona's talking about curious, innovative, act.
Yeah.
How not only would the colors and the messaging be different, but if you are starting a meeting and one group's full of bold truth tellers and the other sees themselves as caring experts, how that might be a radically different conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
And what's interesting is these are all part of this, one organization. So the purposeful partner, the inclusive learner, and the dynamic influencer are all truths about that organization. What we end up doing in the process of design is we try to hone in on where they might want to lean into more in the design work. So, for instance, with the Justice Seeker Systems Changer Champion Finder version, Systems Changer was really the main story that they wanted to come through in the visuals. So how can we show that we are thinking differently? We're going to change stuff. But we kind of added in a very bold look. Mm-hmm. So the Justice Seeker kind of came in a little bit with that. And then the Champion Finder, we kind of made sure that the color palette had a warmth and an approachability. So it was kind of, we try to force that people to make decisions about where do we lean into the most while everything else is true.
Very cool. And I can see more of these coming in. And one of the questions that we'll talk about as we work our way through, because I think we're going to look at a case study next, is how you stay different without being trendy, right?
That's a great question.
And I think this is part of the answer, right?
Yeah. Well, and truly, Kaylin, I believe, Kaylin Nelson, thank you for your question. I think that, first of all, trendy, designs are definitely something that to be on the alert for. But if you build your brand from truth, the core should always remain true. It shouldn't change. How it's expressed, though, I agree with you. What we do here at Smith & Connors when we're designing is we avoid any visual trending that is happening currently or that has happened in the past, and we think about a more kind of timeless or classic approach to design. And usually that means taking away all the extra bells and whistles as much as possible and really getting to a clean, clear look and feel that I love less is more. I mean, I'm a Marie Kondo. I love her. But in design, it's true. You really do want, design from truth is great. I agree. And I think it's just about taking away all those extra bells and whistles as much as possible to get to the heart and soul.
So why don't we look at the case study and see how that kind of plays out?
Let's do it. So,
and for those of you who loved that slide, we will send you the recording so you can work on it some more.
Yep. And if you want me to send that to you separately, feel free to reach out. Love that. So we worked with the Oregon Community Foundation, largest foundation in Oregon. They are a different kind of foundation than a private foundation. The community foundations are their own breed. So this was a unique challenge. Just a quick assessment of why they even wanted to do the brand work. So their objectives were to grow. They want to double in size. They want to increase brand awareness. So their current audience was very not very diverse in many ways, age groups, racial, all across Oregon. So they wanted to attract a much broader audience. They wanted to clarify their very complex story. They're a 45-year-old institution, and it had gotten real muddy over the years, how to even talk about what they do. And then they want kind of better consistent tools and assets to do the work of communication and marketing. The barriers were clarity about who they're talking to, who are their target audiences, their new ones and the current ones, alignment about who they are. So just internal teams, board, staff, executive leadership, there was a lot of disagreement about what it is that they're doing, how do we describe what we're doing and how are we different? And then they wanted much more credibility, up-level their brand and communications. So often people come to us for that. Things get a little out of hand over time. And if you're not really intentional about creating systems and structures for that, it can be Frankenstein mess. And then of course, ease of telling their story, super important part of brand. It's just, what are we saying? How do we say it clearer? Really quick overview of their brand audit that we did. I stood up
on this one, before you go on, it would be a really great point to stop. When you look at the stuff at the bottom, what is your first impression about what this group does? If you want to pop that into the chat. I get a really strong sense. I recognize all this stuff. We live in Oregon too. Of the places in Oregon, what do you see there? Commitment to nature, environmental focus, wilderness. Yeah, right? They look like an environmental group, and Tally, conservation and ecology, right? And partly this is because we know they're a foundation. But without even knowing that they're a foundation, right? Looking at the things at the bottom, if you saw that sitting on a table, and you picked it up, what do you think it would be about?
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I was just going to tell you, I stood up in front of the board and the executive leadership to show this. This was our initial assessment of kind of the gap of where the brand is and where it should be. And they are not an environmentally focused organization. They're also not a tourist board, or they're not a travel guide. They're not any of these things, right? They are for Oregonians, people, and yet we didn't see many people there. Right. They are a community foundation. So community foundations, you can become a donor, create a donor advised fund. So it's for people who want to give generously and make an impact on the communities in which they live. Oregon Community Foundation takes that money and invests it. So they're an investment organization. They're kind of like a Fidelity in that way, but they're different. And then they help you grant it to organizations and efforts to, yes, there is. And this is the before. This is the before. Okay. So let me move on to so this is the brand position that we came up with. They are about bringing together generous Oregonians together for community-driven impact. Their brand drivers and roles are, they are the approachable guide, the tireless optimist, and the steadfast steward. And so you're going to see kind of, you're funny, Steve. Here is the after, since you were dying to see it. You can see in this that, first of all, it's a lot bolder. It's a lot more confident in living into who they are. There's a very strong nod to the idea of legacy. So we really were thinking about how do we make sure it comes through that this is an established old institution, but doesn't feel old, but resonates with younger audiences. Just a quick note on the concept of this logo is we really wanted to show, again, this nod toward the past and the future. So it's very structural. So the steadfast steward is a very important role that they play, because they take lots of money from wealthy Oregonians, and then they are stewards of that, but they're also stewards of our community. But there's a lot of openness in this structure. That was on purpose, very intentional in the design to show that they're flexible. Look at this flexible system, that that there are pathways to get to where you want to go, that the typeface is much more rounded and open. If we go back here, this typeface is extremely kind of dominating. Yeah. You know, and the color palette is so muted here. It's like, what are you about? Is this Oregon? What is this, a leaf? I don't know what this means. I see Chanel. I see the two C's of Chanel, which is a complete disconnect from what they do. So just kind of showing the before and after is a really powerful part of this. And they got very excited about this brand. It feels exciting. It gives the internal teams a sense of confidence. And then, of course, we build across their materials to bring credibility and engagement with audiences, that they can understand what they're doing. You know, there's people now in here. There's all kinds of, different ways that we're representing community through photography, through the patterning. So this is a system across website and everything else that has been extremely customized to the donor journey, the audience's journey, as well as the internal teams. And I wanted to just end this part on this last page, which it was extremely gratifying to see how the staff and board and executive leadership really are owning the brand now, because it's true to them and it feels exciting and authentic. You know, these headshots that we had them retake and we art directed for them, they're all wearing brand colors, and they're showing personality, and it's showing kind of who they really are. And that was super important to us, to see that. So that shows kind of an overarching brand project, the transformation that can happen both from external audiences to understand who they're about to internal teams. And kind of a little bit of the framework about it. And like I said, after this webinar, I do have a worksheet that has information. I'm happy to also, if you get in touch with me after the webinar, I'm happy to talk more about this.
You know what I really love about this particular case study, and how you walk through it, is that when their brand before was still professional. I mean, they had a logo, they had a color scheme, they had imagery, they had, all of the things that we normally think about as being branding, right? Yeah. All of this, it's consistent. I've got a letterhead and all of that, but it didn't say anything important that connected to who they were trying to be authentically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that switch, that getting at that authentic truth is such a big deal.
Absolutely. And for a nonprofit, we do a lot of work with foundations and nonprofits and government and public agencies, and they don't think about brand and what it can do because it feels like a corporate effort, but it's not. It's about that kind of core story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to Elise. You want to move?
Yeah. So I can't. There's a button I'm going to push somewhere where I'm going to take your request remote control. That's the button. Okay. Have I got it?
Got it.
All right. Excellent. Tally has introduced me to a new way to do slides, which has been an adventure for me. So we've talked about brand, and now we're going to talk about designing meaningful meetings based on your brand. So let's see how to make that go. Go. Hey, that worked. Great. Did it work because you made it go? And I said, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Well, I might just say go often. All right. So when we talked about authenticity and living your truth and putting that into words. So when you're going to design a meeting that's gone, am I back? Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. Thanks. And then you're working on creating team identity, right? So we've used the words to figure out what that identity is. How do you live it every day? And to explore this, we're going to look at 6, so that you can do this with all of your meetings. You can do it, start to end, every different kind of meeting you run. But to illustrate the point, we're going to look specifically at stories from 6 team meeting check-ins. So this is a way in which 6 different teams run that very first few minutes of their meetings. And before we get into this, I'm building on Tally's fabulous strategy sort of platform thing. There are several elements to a great check-in ritual, just like there are several elements to a great brand. So every time you get people together in a meeting, regardless of the type it is, those first 5 minutes should be used to make sure that you're helping everybody get aligned to the purpose of the meeting. So today we are talking about brand, we're talking about check-ins. When you showed up, if you showed up early, you had an opportunity to explore your brand directly. The second element, you want to make sure you get everyone engaged. So it's one of the reasons our webinars tend to have more chat open than others. The ritual should be appropriate in terms of amount of time. So very, very business-like elements. You're not going to spend a ton of time there. But in other places, if your purpose is about team building and authenticity and some of those caring leader kind of values, you might be spending more time on that aspect. You're going to frame the mood. And then this last one, which you won't see in most of the other facilitation guides you've seen, a great check-in ritual is in fact a ritual, which means it can be led by anyone. So it becomes a thing, a part of the culture and the way that your team runs your meetings. So let's look at some examples. In theory, go. Oh, there we go. So let's start with one I talk about quite a bit. This is Amazon. So Amazon has a very famous check-in ritual, but before we get into that, let's talk about what Amazon's brand is. And while you're in the chat, when you think of Amazon, what are some of the words that come to mind for you?
These words here, my business partner Scott and I both, we added these. So I just want you to know this is not coming from their specific brand book, but this is from our observation.
Right. So we see speedy delivery and reliable in the chat. Are there any other things? Polluting. They have all the things, right? Tax dodgers. Yeah, one of the words that came up for me was ruthless, right? But they're also, as Kaylin says, no fluff, very efficient. And frankly, we use, just to be clear, we use a lot of Amazon's services because we run software platforms. So, blessing and curse.
I believe I side with Kim on this one. Kills small business.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that's our perception of their brand. Now, what story are they telling themselves? Let's move on. So these are their leadership principles. Okay, and there's another group later, and I'm going to show you in the same format. So keep an eye on this. So ownership, bias for action, frugality, diving deep, disagree and commit, insist on the highest standards. So their principles are about being right, being fast, getting customers, making it go, delivering results. And their check-in ritual reflects this. So their check-in ritual is the silent, no, this is not their check-in ritual. It's the wrong slide. Let me tell you about their check-in ritual. So their check-in ritual at Amazon is what we call the briefing. So they have this practice where before every meeting, the people who are going to be in the meeting and who are presenting a decision will write it out in full paragraphs, right? So they have to think through it very intentionally. So they write out what they're about to talk about in full paragraphs, and they print it out and they bring it to the meeting. And then they take the first 5 to 10 minutes and everybody in the room reads that briefing in silence. So they're doing a couple of things here. First of all, they're being incredibly efficient, right? They don't have any prep work before the meeting. You're doing your prep work in the meeting. They're making sure that everybody's aligned to the purpose of the meeting, that they're all engaged doing the same activity at the same time. If you remember those elements of an effective check-in, that they're all on the same page. And they're forcing the person who wants to have the decision made to think it through well enough to write down in full paragraphs, right? At the end of their meetings, they come to a decision, and they may not all agree. They disagree and commit. So I've talked to people from Amazon, and they use this at the leadership level. They also use it at the team level. So at the engineering teams and whatnot, they'll write down, their status update for the week and put those out there too. So again, Amazon's ritual, a silent review of the facts and the business matters that they need to make decisions about, so everybody's on the same page before they begin their discussion. Let's look at a different group. So this is RSF Social Finance, and they are an investment firm that invests explicitly in values-driven, social impact, community-oriented enterprises and businesses. So when you look at them, what kind of brand impressions are you getting right off the bat? And again, Tally and Scott have given us a couple of ideas. For me, their brand, tells me, I was a little bit confused when I first looked at it that they were in fact an investment bank, because it was so warm and so personal, just like Rona says, warm and personal. And they express themselves, people, connections, all of that, right? Meaning, align your money with your values, right there on the homepage. Mm-hmm. And when you look at their story, the story that they tell themselves, it's very different from Amazon. So they say they envision a world in which money serves the highest intentions of the human spirit. Money economy is based on generosity and interconnectedness. And they use money very much like Amazon uses money, but they do it to create financial relationships, as you can read, that are focused on long-term social, economic, and ecological benefit. Now, what's kind of interesting is that RSF Social Finance, just like Amazon, starts their meetings in silence. But they do it differently. So they don't start their meetings by reading a briefing. They instead walk in and they turn off all of their technology and they put down their phones and they are just together. And when they first started this practice, they started for a minute, and over time it became 3 and then 5. And in those minutes, some of them use meditation techniques, but most of them just take that time to think about their purpose. As we work together as an investment group, how do we make the best investments we can to drive forth long-term economic health, ecological stability, and community benefit?
So, it's interesting to think about how the kind of core of who they are can direct how they meet. And just kind of pulling it back to the brand, Amazon being this very just driven company, clearly, they want to kind of take over the world. Their bias for action makes a lot of sense in how they actually make, how they collaborate as a team, how they meet. And then, the RSF Social Finance being more about values driven from a place of, humanity and connection, allowing people to actually sit silently, that is an extension of that brand. So just kind of thinking about how you behave, how you act.
And in the two cases, one of the things that we've noticed is that if your goal is to do meaningful, purpose-driven work, that's not how our world is organized right now, right? Our world is very fast. It's very, you've got to achieve more. You got to be more productive. You got to get farther. And especially if your job is to distribute and manage money towards profit, which is, make no mistake, they are in fact meaning to have that fund be profitable as well as valuable. how do you in fact make sure that you stay connected to a purpose that's less tangible, less spreadsheety, right? And this is the practice they've come up with that. Let's take another example. So Brene Brown, who here knows about Brene Brown? Caitlin loves her. Oh, all kinds of I do. So Brene Brown is a professor and an author and a speaker, and she does a lot of great work helping people touch into vulnerability as a key aspect of brave leadership, right? Like, so how do we become who we truly are and then use that to lead powerful organizations? So when you think about Brene Brown, what do you think about in terms of brand? And I think Tally and Scott may have.
Yeah, we came up with this. Cool. Yeah, I think just compassion, self-effacing, wise. I think also just, she's super honest.
Yeah.
Authentic and blunt, in a way that she's saying things that we all are thinking, but don't feel always like we have the permission to say. Yeah, real, nice.
Yeah, and kind of little folksy, right? Yeah. Like she will tell you how things really are. Definitely. Self-aware, excellent. And in terms of how they talk about themselves, so Brene Brown runs an organization. They do training, they do facilitation, they do workshops, and they talk about themselves loudly and frequently. So these are some of her many books.
And I just want to pause on the visual here because I love this. Again, just from a brand standpoint, yeah, exactly. They're very aspirational. Thank you, Kaylin. I think also just the look and feel, all of them a little bit different, but still that you get this sense of humanity and warmth and also boldness in everything that she does.
And because Ms. Brown's work is very much about how you show up in companies, in businesses with people, right? Because, being vulnerable by yourself is not at all the same thing as being vulnerable with your team. If you read these books, like most business books, you will find that they are full of examples from meetings. And one of the examples that she gives in Dare to Lead is about a practice they use called permission slips. So in Brene's work, she talks about the importance of having your team get together and rumble, right? Like, so basically it's their word for working through some hard to talk about stuff that's holding you back from achieving what you need. And one of the rituals they use at the beginning of a rumble is what they call permission slips. So everybody on the team gets a piece of paper, and it could be a sticky note, or you could write it in your own piece of paper in your own journal or whatnot, and you write down something you're giving yourself permission to do in that conversation. So page 53 in Dare to Lead, if you want to look up some meeting practices, I'll give you a couple of examples that she shares. She says, some people say things like, I give myself permission to be present here, even though I'm getting pulled in another direction today. Mm-hmm. Or, I give myself permission to ask for more time to think about something before I share my point of view. Or, I give myself permission to ask for breaks if we need them. Right? Whatever it is that you wouldn't necessarily do, but you might need to do to get the best result. You can take a moment, give yourself permission to do that before you start into the conversation. So that's a check-in ritual. Everybody has a specific guided question, right? Just like a traditional icebreaker. And everybody answers it. But in this case, they're giving themselves permission to be authentic.
It's fascinating because, even at Smith & Connors, and we're a very kind of values-driven company. We don't really have, I've never really thought about how we meet, and I'm fascinated by a way to, think about, well, what does it mean to be human in a job? What does it mean to, clear the air potentially? What was this too?
So the question is, do they keep it what they've written to themselves, or do they share it? They share it. Yeah, it's something that's shared out loud. That's part of the practice, right? It's a mini step into being authentic and vulnerable. Like before we came onto this webinar, my internet has a tendency to freeze. I gave my co-presenters permission to call me out on it and then take over the conversation. So, but that wasn't something I did with everybody here, and maybe I should have. So it's a mini step. Let's talk about another group that does also a verbal check-in, just like the permission slip check-in. Now, this is Atlassian. Atlassian is a technology company based in Australia. They are, like Amazon, enormous. They are absolutely very, very successful, very powerful. They have branches all over the world. They have a great story in terms of their economic business success. And when you look at them, what kind of impressions are you getting from their brand right off the bat? And for those of you who are not familiar with what Atlassian does, they build software, right, to help software development teams primarily. I see Steve says tech. Yes, they're clearly a tech team.
The graphics are very friendly. The colors are punchy. So there's something very approachable about them. Their typeface is bold and big. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love, Rona points out they have got sort of healthy air and water, bigger than the work itself, right? So while it's tech, you're not seeing lots of, we're not seeing, transistors, we're not seeing circuit boards, we're not seeing, fancy displays. Professional, a little more professional. That's right. They're very much about business, and down to earth. I love that.
A lot of teamwork happening, which is also, I think, an important one.
So when we look at, so this is, our impression. How do they talk about themselves? So Atlassian's story, they say their mission is to help unleash the potential of every team. And if you want to get a job at Atlassian, they're always hiring. Here are the values they espouse. So openness, right? And they're sharing their openness in a very folksy, down to earth kind of way, with the unhappy cow there who's been axed out, playing as a team, building heart with balance, build with heart and balance. So they're balancing. We want to be about teams and people, but we're not. We're also about business, right? Don't mess with the customer. Although those little things don't stand for mess, but you know what they stand for, and then be the change you seek. So this organization, like Amazon, big successful tech organization, how do they start their meetings? Well, Atlassian's done a really good job of designing their meeting flow models and their communication architecture, so they don't start all their meetings the same way. But at the leadership team level, they have a weekly meeting, and they start it with a ritual they call top of mind. And they go around, their leadership team's about 8 people, and each person has 1 minute to talk about what's top of mind for them at work, and 1 minute to talk about what's top of mind for them personally. And they just share. So everybody speaks, everybody's in, and the mission, the purpose for them in those meetings is to come together as a team to balance the heart and the work, and to make good decisions about how they're going to lead their business forward. And as they have done this over the years, they have found that they have all kinds of extra non-work related ways in which they connect. And they're able to understand better each other's perspectives when they get down into the mud and need to make those hard business decisions. They kind of see better where everybody's coming from. And for those of you who are facilitators in the audience, if you're familiar with the ritual of clearing, this is basically a very formalized way of clearing. So starting the meeting by getting things off of your head and out of your mind so that you can focus on the task at hand. So that's Atlassian's check-in ritual.
I want to kind of connect this back again. So the idea of story and narrative, and Kaylin, I see your question. I want to get to that. But, what's cool about Atlassian's ritual and also Brene Brown's is, so we connect, I keep saying story, right? Brand is story. It's about narrative and what's important about, and how do we connect? And when you connect to people and you give them a chance in a meeting to talk about what's going on for them, we connect much deeper. There's a way to understand both what they're thinking about from a work standpoint and a personal standpoint. I mean, that to me is a powerful way to create a sense of cohesion. Why am I here? Why are you here? I think story, it's what we live on. It's why the media and Netflix and all of these, like, there's so much story that we can tap into in the world, because it's kind of what we crave. So thinking about how, your company or organization, what you're about, and then thinking about how that can be expressed through a way to interact in meetings, it's just an amazing thing. It can actually have very big effects on people feeling a purpose, people feeling together, people wanting to help each other. I love it. Can I pause and answer Kaylin's question?
Sure, you bet.
Okay. So why do customers care? How do we get them to care about that? Kaylin, I think basically the answer is your values and mission, while you don't need to state them, I mean, it is good to state them, but that is not the communication that's going to ultimately, it should be imbued in how you interact with your customers, what you say, how you present your information. So if you're not developing communications and marketing with your values and mission embedded, the customer has less of a reason to care. Ultimately, I think we're all seeing people. The world is starting to take notice of, what's at the heart of a company. What should I be spending my money at Amazon or other places that maybe don't share my values? This is actually becoming a very big thing, very important to people given where things are in the world. And so that's my answer, is like, just really, like, if the heart and soul of who you are is not coming through, then it's less of a reason for the customer to care about what you're doing.
And I think, I have another example that I think speaks to that too, because I would agree. While mission, vision, values are really incredibly important things to know for yourself and your internal team, the research on mission, vision, value work is pretty clear. Most people have no clue what the mission, vision, and values are for the companies that they work in, right? Like they don't even know, right? So I'm finishing up a quick start with an organization right now, and that's a program where we go in and we help them uncover how meetings work in their teams, and then how to drive their vision, their values, their goals into how they're meeting in practice, right? So they design their own meetings and we work through that together. And for this particular organization, one of their key goals was to find better ways to gather up, that was their language, we wanted to gather up news from the field and insights from what's happening in the front lines. And then we wanted to make sure we radiate out, right? So that the decisions we're making are transparent and clear and open to everybody. So they're looking at doing information flow, and they use this language over and over and over again. So one of the things they ended up doing as we work together is they have a weekly leadership team meeting, and they have a check-in that they're working on developing and making just right. And then the second item on their agenda is gathering up, right? And the final item before they close out is called radiate out, where they make sure they look at everything they've done and they are doing what in other business contexts you might call cascading messages. So they're being very clear about what they're going to communicate out to others. But it's their language aligned to the things that are in their value statement that just show up in front of them and their customers every day. And that's where that connection and that thing comes into play. All right. So we've got two more examples. I'm going to go through these kind of fast if my internet. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the next one's Intel. And if you've noticed before, there's a little bit of a balance, right? So we have Amazon and RSF, and they both do silent meeting check-ins, and Brene Brown and Atlassian, and they both do go-arounds, but very different ones. So the next one we're going to talk about is Intel. And Intel, back in the day, at least, it was led by this gentleman. This is Andy Grove. And Andy Grove's hot mission in life was operational excellence. So when you look at Intel and you think about their brand, Intel is, for those of us who are in Oregon, we know lots and lots of people who have worked at Intel. And so we have some really clear insights into what it means to work for Intel. But, Tally and her team put together brainy and innovative, some other things that we know about them because of their focus on operational excellence is that they're a strong meritocracy, which means they value getting things right and achieving specific results. And if anything comes up for you in terms of your impressions of Intel, go ahead and add them in. In terms of the story that Intel is telling themselves, process, absolutely. Data, yes. So their stated vision is they envision a world in which money serves the highest intentions of the spirit and contributes to an economy based on generosity and interconnectedness. And their mission is to create financial relationships that are direct, transparent, personal, and focused on long-term social, economic, and ecological benefit. I have to say, this has not been my experience of them, but but maybe it is, so there's certainly some drivers underneath there. And this is not, is that the wrong one?
I think it was the wrong one.
That would explain why it doesn't make sense at all with what I'm thinking about. I'm like, golly, that doesn't seem right at all. So as John mentioned in chat, results are king. That's really their story, right? Results are king. And their check-in ritual is they walk into a room and they use a decision-making process which is called either the consult or the advice process. So that basically means regardless of who all is in the room, one person has ultimate responsibility for the decision, right? One person's going to make that final decision. So the question is, who's got the D? And they identify who that one person is. And when before we send these slides out, I'll get their actual vision and mission in there. So this example makes better sense. So who's got the D? We're getting on it. We're not even going to say the word decision because we're moving fast. We're going to pinpoint who's in charge and we're going to get moving, right?
Yeah.
Michael's got it here. He says, Intel's mission is to delight our customers, employees, and shareholders by relentlessly delivering the platform and technology advancements that become essential to the way we work and live. Right on, relentless. Yeah. Perfect. So thank you, Michael. So let's look at our final example. Okay, I spent some time trying to learn how to pronounce this today. Heiligenfeld is a group of medical clinics, hospitals, rehabilitation centers based in Germany. And they stepped away from the way that healthcare had been run then and decided to find a more integrative, holistic way of running their business. That was why they were founded. So when you look at their brand, it's very, very simple. What are some immediate impressions you're getting? And Tally says human, healing, collaborative care. Nice. That's very, very true. You see the circle going on in that picture. Yeah, it's a standing meeting. So they're being efficient, but they're also being the power. Who's in charge of that room? Yeah, almost old-timey. Yeah, if you go and look at some of their English websites, it looks very 1990s, right? The early 2000s want their website back, but it's very simple and clear. And they have these stories. So this is the story they tell them, and this honestly is theirs. So now this is the English translation of the German. But if you remember before, when we looked at Amazon's leadership principles, they were laid out the same way. They had about the same number. In this case, we see community. We see ecological responsibility. Beauty shows up on their list. Life supporting shows up on their list. When you look at this list versus Amazon's and you go back and compare them later, radically different. Radically different. Their check-in ritual starts with a question just like Intel's does. And their question is, who will ring the bells? So at the beginning of every meeting, they ask who will ring the bells. And one person volunteers to do it for the group. And the rule is this. If that person believes that the discussion that's going on in the room is coming from a place of ego, right? If somebody is making an argument to be right, or because they have a vested personal stake in it, and they're losing sight of the larger purpose of the group and what's best for the organization's mission, right? If it's starting to get off track, then that person will ring the bells. And they use these tincture bells like this. And the rule is that everybody has to go silent and contemplate why were the bells rung until the echo of the bells finishes. So that's my final example. And from here, we're going to go into questions. I think I should ring these bells to mark the transition.
Nice.
And we learned earlier that you guys can't hear the resonance because of the awesome noise counseling. But with that, so those are the bells. It's time for us to be moving on to, before we go, we've got just a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any questions for us? And then also, we have some worksheets to send. So there's, Tally's got one here, and we'll send this in the follow-up with information or that brand framework for you to go ahead and fill some of that in. And then I have a worksheet that will help you design a check-in ritual for your team, and we'll send the recording as well. So with that, any other questions or final thoughts about how you might take and put a great brand together and then use that to change how you run your meetings?
Pop your questions in the panel. Oh, thank you, Jeremy.
Merci and thank yous. Thanks a lot.
And if you have bigger questions that we don't have time for today, just get in touch with us.
Yeah.
We can talk.
So Tally, what are you going to do? Do you think you're going to change a check-in ritual for your team?
Definitely. I'm already thinking about it. I just was at a meeting recently that where people cleared the air with each other before. Mm-hmm. So you look at everybody in the eye and you say you're clear or not. And if there's something that's not clear, you kind of mention it and talk about it later. Nice.
Yeah, that's cool. So is that the kind of thing that you would,
I like it. I mean, I think there's anything that's going to ground us in, hey, we're people. Yeah. Like doing the work together. Can we make some acknowledgements about what's going on in our lives, or what's worrying us, or what's good. I think anytime that we can ground ourselves in that, because otherwise it's just usually feels like a race, you know, we're all just trying to get our work done. And so I think that is what resonated for me the most, is like being intentional about how do we acknowledge each other and what's happening and connect a little deeper versus checking boxes, looking at the agenda, getting moving. That really was cool.
Well, I think I suppose I should share what we do, right? Yeah. So, you know, we're Lucid Meetings, and we have these examples and dozens more. And given our personality, we're curious, we're about getting it right, we're about exploring, we're about whole team, whole people, and we switch it up. So we have people rotate who leads our internal meetings. Every month it's a different facilitator, and it's that facilitator's choice, right? Mm-hmm. So we experiment with things that, as long as their values aligned and purpose aligned and they check all those boxes, we leave it up to the facilitator to choose.
Love it.
Yeah, right now I think we have a facilitator who doesn't like check-ins, so we get a couple moments of silence, and then she's like, "Are you ready to go?" And that's what we've got this month, and that's okay, because that's authentic.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your thanks. Thanks for sticking with us. We will send you the recording soon.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.